All right, ready to jump into ancient Greece, but not the way they usually tell it. We're diving into Sparta. You specifically asked to go deeper than just, the 300 Spartans thing,
Mm.
right? Like, really uncover what made this place tick.
Yeah, it's a fascinating request, actually. I mean, everyone thinks they know Sparta, right?
Yeah.
The warriors, the shields, the whole mole and leg thing.
Yeah.
But you wanted to get to the why, and that's where things get really interesting.
Exactly. So, to get us started, we're using Wikipedia as our kind of like our jumping off point today.
Makes sense. He gives a good overview. Like, think of it as that little snack preview they have at the grocery store, you
Ah,
know?
okay, I like that. Gives you just enough to like make you want the full experience.
Exactly. Wikipedia provides the broad strokes, the historical scaffolding, and then we'll use that framework to build out a more intricate understanding of Spartan society. Really uncover the nuances, the complexities that often, get overlooked.
Perfect. So, to kick things off, set the scene for us. Where exactly are we dropping into ancient Greece? What made Sparta stand out from all the others?
All right, so picture the southeastern Peloponnese Peninsula, a region known as Laconia, nestled in the fertile Eurotas Valley. That's where you'd find Sparta. Now, they were famous or infamous, maybe for their military power, but what really set them apart was their social structure. Imagine a society so, tightly woven, so fiercely dedicated to this single vision that every aspect of life revolved around it.
That's what always gets me about Sparta, They weren't just a city-state, they were more like a social experiment on a massive scale. But before we get too far, can we clear up something that always trips me up? Sparta, Lacedaemon, Laconia, what's the deal with all those?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's a bit of a historical tongue twister. Think of it this way. Sparta is the city itself, the heart of everything. Lacedaemon, which is often used as an adjective that encompasses the broader territory they controlled, the Spartan state, if you will. And then finally, you've got Laconia, which refers to the entire region surrounding Sparta, including the areas under, their influence.
Got it. Okay, so Sparta's the city, Lacedaemon is kind of their state, and Laconia is like their sphere of influence. Got it. Now, for someone who might have slept through their ancient history class, what's the Spark Notes version of Sparta's timeline?
Okay, well, their story starts around the 900s BC with the Dorian migrations that happened after the collapse of the Mycenaean civilization.
Yeah.
Fast forward a couple centuries, and Sparta's facing some serious growing pains.
Hmm.
Lawlessness, internal strife, you name it. It was clear they needed a change, like a complete system reboot.
Cue the dramatic music, Dugo. Enter Lycurgus. Right. The mysterious lawgiver often credited with reshaping Sparta.
Exactly. Now, separating fact from fiction with Lycurgus, that's a challenge in itself, right? But whether he was a real individual or kind of blend of historical figures, the reforms attributed to him, those were nothing short of radical. I mean, they turned Sparta into the society we're talking about today.
So it was like Sparta 2.0 total transformation almost overnight.
Well, not overnight, thinking in historical terms,
Mm.
but the changes were profound. And because of these reforms, Sparta became prominent, like a dominant force in the Peloponnese by the 6th century BC. Their army, which was renowned for its discipline and effectiveness, I mean, they became the force in Greece.
So by like the 5th century, they were basically the Spartans we picture in our heads, right?
Yeah.
Those elite warriors feared and admired.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. But even then, Sparta was more than just a bunch of warriors. Their society, which was shaped by Lycurgus's reforms, it was this complex system with different classes, and each one played a part in maintaining like, their unique way of life.
Okay, so let's break down Spartan society then, because they weren't all super soldiers, right? Who are the different groups that actually lived in Sparta?
You're right, Spartan society, it was kind of like a pyramid with different layers all contributing to the whole. At the top, you had the Spartiates, the full citizens. They dedicated their lives to military training and service. They were the warrior elite, the ones who embodied the Spartan ideals of discipline, courage, and self-sacrifice.
They're the Spartans we see in the movies, right? The ones with like six-pack abs and a permanent game face.
A bit of an exaggeration, maybe, but yeah, you get the idea. But the Spartiates were actually a minority within Spartan society. Then you had the Perioikoi. They were free inhabitants, but not full citizens. These are the skilled craftsmen, merchants, the ones keeping the Spartan economy running. They were also expected to serve in the military when needed, providing essential support to the Spartan, war machine.
Okay, so Spartiates are the warriors. The Perioikoi are like the backbone of their economy. Who else is there?
Ah, well, that brings us to the most uh, controversial group in Spartan society, the helots.
The helots. Weren't they like the people Sparta conquered and forced into servitude?
Essentially, yeah. Bound to the land, working the estates of the Spartiates, they provided the agricultural labor that sustained the entire system. Their status was even a point of contention back in ancient Greece. Some said they were like serfs, others saw it as closer to slavery. But one thing's for sure, the helots were essential to Spartan society, even though they weren't given the same rights and privileges as the Spartiates or the Periokoi.
Sounds like a power keg waiting to explode this rigid social hierarchy with the helots at the bottom. But before we go into potential for like unrest, let's go back to the Spartans. Everyone's always so fascinated by the warriors. Their training was supposed to be incredibly tough, starting basically from birth.
Right. Absolutely. But it wasn't just about physical strength, though that was heavily emphasized. The agoge, which was their education system, was designed very specifically to mold boys into ideal Spartan citizens. Loyal, courageous, and utterly devoted to the state above all else. Yeah, picture this. Spartan boys, taken from their families at 7 years old.
7. That's like elementary school. I can't imagine sending my kid off with a drill sergeant at that age. What was the point of starting so young?
It all goes back to that focus on the state. Sparta believed that being loyal, disciplined, strong, those weren't things you're born with, but things you became through training and hardship. So, start young, mold them to the Spartan ideal.
So like Spartan boot camp before they even hit puberty. We've all heard the stories though, right? About how tough it was. Was it really that brutal?
Oh, it was harsh, definitely. The agoge was meant to weed out weakness, instill courage. We're talking rigorous training, no luxuries. They were even encouraged to steal food.
Hold on, stealing was encouraged? What, like a Spartan version of tough love? What was the logic there?
Survival. Sparta believed a good soldier, a good Spartan, needed to fend for themselves, be resourceful, adaptable, even if it meant bending the rules a little. But it wasn't all about being a soldier. They also learned music, dance, poetry.
Wait, really? I wouldn't have pictured that. So it wasn't all just push-ups and spear throwing.
Right, it's a side of Sparta that gets overshadowed. But they knew a well-rounded citizen warrior or not needed more than just strength. Those artistic things, they weren't just hobbies. They built discipline, grace, even strategic thinking.
Fascinating. A sharp mind and a two-edged sword. But okay, let's talk about one of the most, well, enduring stories about Sparta. The baby in the chasm. How true is that one? Did they really just get rid of babies if they weren't good enough?
It's a story that's stuck around for centuries, right? And it does paint a kind of chilling picture of Spartan society. Plutarch, who's one of our main sources on Sparta, he just described this thing where newborns were examined and those deemed, too weak, deformed, they were left to die.
That's pretty jarring even for back then. What were they trying to achieve with that?
We have to remember, infanticide, awful as it is to us now, it wasn't unique to Sparta. Lots of ancient cultures did it, limited resources, societal pressures, things like that. But the systematic way it's described in Spartan tradition, if it's true, that is something else.
So it adds to this image of Sparta as like ruthlessly pragmatic, the collective good above all else, even the lives of babies.
Exactly. But we do have to be careful with these accounts. How much it was actually done, the reasons behind it, historians still debate that.
The mystery of the baby chasm continues. Okay, moving on to something else that's always, well, raised eyebrows. The relationships between older Spartan men and younger boys. What can you tell us about that? What was the deal there?
Right, Spartan pederasty, it's something we have to talk about, but also, approach carefully. Historical context is everything here. We can't just put our own modern values onto it.
Totally. So what was the accepted role of these relationships?
The idea is that older warriors would take younger boys under their wing, like mentors, role models, during their agoge training. A formalized system of mentorship, passing down knowledge, Spartan values, that kind of thing.
Take the shield and the wisdom, sort of. But were these relationships ever, more than just mentorship?
That's the big question, and historians are still debating it. Some say it was mainly about education, character building. Others point to evidence suggesting a more intimate aspect, too.
So it's still a bit of a gray area, lost to history, open to interpretation. Okay, let's switch gears, talk about Spartan women. Famous for their strength, independence, their, well, unconventional roles, to say the least.
Absolutely. Spartan women were nothing like women in other Greek city-states. Athenian women were largely confined to their homes, Spartan women. They had a level of freedom and influence that was really remarkable, especially for that time.
Okay, spill it. What made them so different?
For one, they were educated. Spartan girls got formal training, same as boys. Music, dance, athletics, less of the combat stuff, of course.
Mm.
Being physically fit, strong, that was encouraged, seen as essential for, well, bearing strong Spartan warriors.
So while the boys were off learning to swing swords, the women were busy creating more warriors.
In a way, yeah. But Spartan women were valued for a lot more than just being mothers. Their education gave them this well-rounded upbringing that trained their minds and bodies.
Sounds like they were set up to be active parts of society, not just sitting on the sidelines.
Exactly. And that's what set them apart. Spartan women, they were known for being sharp, outspoken, and they were involved in managing property, finances.
Wait, they handled finances? That's like unheard of back then. How did they have that kind of power?
With their husbands often away fighting, it fell to the women to manage the estates, oversee the helots. They kept the Spartan economy going, basically. And, get this, they could even own property in their own names. Almost unthinkable in other Greek city-states.
Wow, they were way ahead of their time. Sounds like Spartan women were, like, running the show back home while the men were off conquering.
They were definitely pivotal. They had influence at home and in the community, and their influence went beyond just the home front. They were politically savvy, they shaped public opinion, and they were outspoken, even challenging powerful men.
It really changes how you think about women in the ancient world, huh? Not just wives and mothers, but like landowners, businesswomen, even political players. But did any of them actually fight? Were there Spartan women warriors? Feels like something you'd see in a movie.
Right, the image of the woman with the shield and sword is a powerful one. And Spartan women were raised to be strong, resilient, but that strength came out in different ways. They were vital in instilling that warrior spirit in their sons, husbands, but they weren't on the battlefield themselves. More Hollywood than history, that's for sure.
Okay, so no fighting alongside the men. But still, sounds like they were forces to be reckoned with. What about their personal lives, though? Did they have a say in things like who they married?
Marriage in Sparta was, let's just say, unusual, even for ancient Greece. Athenian girls got married young, but Spartan women, not until their late teens, maybe even early 20s.
Now, that's what I call waiting for the right one. What was the thinking there?
Goes back to that Spartan thing about strength, vitality. They thought women should be physically mature before marriage, kids, all that. And here's the really interesting part. Divorce. Totally allowed. And either the husband or the wife could initiate it.
Wait, are you serious? Divorce in ancient Sparta, that's unheard of, basically. Like, they were hundreds of years ahead in some ways.
Right. Really makes you think about those old gender roles. But hey, let's shift gears a bit. We got to talk about Sparta's legacy, because their impact goes way beyond ancient Greece. Even now, saying Spartan makes people think of discipline, toughness, like it's this mythical level of, I don't know, resilience.
Makes sense. You've got Spartan workouts, Spartan races, it's a whole thing. But it's not just the warrior image, right? Why else does Sparta still fascinate us after all this time?
It's called laconophilia, this, like lasting admiration for Sparta and everything they stood for. And part of it, sure, it's the warriors, the stories of courage, the whole underdog thing. It's compelling.
Who doesn't love a good underdog story, right? Especially one with that much, fighting prowess. But you're saying there's more to it than just that.
Totally. See, Sparta's also been romanticized as this ideal state. No decadence, none of the corruption that other city-states like Athens were known for. Philosophers, from Plato to Rousseau, they pointed to Sparta as the example. This society that valued duty, simplicity, putting the common good above everything else.
So they were like the noble savages of their time, living a purer life, more virtuous.
Yeah, kind of. But, and this is important, a lot of what we know about Sparta came from outside Sparta. People writing about them, often with their own biases, admiring some things, criticizing others.
Like trying to figure out a celebrity from, like, tabloid rumors. You're only getting a tiny part of the story. So is there any way to get a more, like, balanced view? Did any Spartans write stuff themselves that survived?
Not really, or at least not much. We have archaeology, inscriptions, a few scraps of Spartan writing. But for the full story, we mostly have to rely on what outsiders said.
Makes you wonder what we're missing, How much of their side is just gone?
It's true. History's always a work in progress, this conversation between then and now.
Speaking of conversations, we've covered a ton in our Spartan deep dive. What would you say is, like, the key takeaway for our listeners? What's the one thing to remember?
I think it's that Sparta was a society of contradictions. Yes, the warriors, the discipline, all that. But also music, poetry, intellectual stuff. Their women had surprising freedom, but the system relied on exploiting a lot of people. Sparta's not easily categorized. It's complicated, nuanced, and that's what keeps us interested even today.
It's true. History's rarely black and white. Always more to the story, different sides to think about, even the societies that seem, brutal at first glance. Well, as we wrap up our Spartan deep dive, one last thing to ponder. We've focused a lot on their warriors, their training, battles, all that, but our sources also mention Spartan art, sculptures, pottery, even music, and it makes you wonder if we could shed our own ideas about them, that warrior obsession. What incredible art might we find? Something to think about. This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for exploring the world of ancient Sparta with us.
Until next time.